Hey guys, it's been a little while since I've been in front of the camera, but running out of ideas that involve just using my hands or equipment. So this is going to be the start of a series of videos that are going to be about various skills required for completing a long distance through hike and specifically a distance through hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. So it may not be as exciting as a gear video, but hopefully it'll be useful, and I personally think it's as, if not more, important to know some of this stuff. So I'm going to start off with, this one's going to be about desert hiking, and it's going to cover water, heat and sun, weather, wildlife, foot care, chafe, and camping. So a lot of different aspects of desert hiking because it's very different. If you're used to hiking in the mountains, you're used to hiking in the woods, you're used to hiking up north in Pacific Northwest, all that. Desert hiking is a totally different beast. And hopefully this series, or at least this video, will help shed some light on a few things. So let's start off with water. So how much water should you carry and how much water are you going to drink? That's going to vary greatly. That's going to vary greatly depending on the frequency of water sources and your personal needs. So, how much you should be able to carry, I think you should be capable of carrying at least 6 liters of water. At least. Some people carried more. I didn't hear of too many people successfully carrying less than that and not suffering through a few stretches or doing a lot of night hiking. I didn't really like night hiking a lot, but that is a strategy to use less water. So you should be able to carry at least 6 liters of water. So make sure you have containers for that. And kind of related, make sure those containers are reliable. This one reason I don't like using bladders anymore is because I found them to be incredibly unreliable. I had bladders pop on me a lot and at very inconvenient times, and I was pretty gentle with them, but still, after a while, they wear out. So I used hard water bottles. I used smart water bottles, Gatorade bottles, that kind of thing, and it worked out pretty well. So, so 6 liters of water minimum, and make sure it's stored in a safe container that's going to hold on to it and it isn't going to wear out, or at least is something that you can replace pretty easily along trail. Now, drinking, generally you're going to drink about 1 liter for every 5 miles, but that's going to change. In the beginning, it's going to be a lot more. After about 2 weeks, your body will adjust to the heat, and you'll start to sweat a little more efficiently. You'll use your water a little more efficiently, and you'll use less. It's going to depend on how much hiking during the day you're doing. Like I said, there's night hiking. You can do that if it's a stretch with very little water. That's a viable technique. And like there's going to be a stretch coming up in this trip that I did during the day last time that I'm going to do at night this time because it's really rough, and it's the LA Aqueduct. I did it during the day. It was beautiful, don't get me wrong. I did a couple of videos while I was on it, but man, there's no shade at all. So I'm going to do it at night this time. But you're going to, like I said, you're going to drink about 1 liter for every 5 miles. That's a fair estimate. Now that leads us to dehydration, which is very serious. Dehydration, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, all these things are very serious, and as some of you should know, a young man died last year in the first 20 miles before he even got to Lake Morena of, I believe it was heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and apparently this happened while I was within 5 miles of him. He was behind me. I didn't know. I didn't meet him, but I got to kick off, and I saw a couple of people there, namely one person from the PCTA that I had run into, because I'm from Sacramento, and the PCTA is located here, and he told me about it. He asked me if I had heard or if I had seen anything. So, no, but I did see the rescue helicopters going. So dehydration, heat stroke, all that is extremely serious, and if you're not careful with your water intake, that can happen. So keep an eye on how much water you're drinking. Make sure you're drinking enough. Make sure you're carrying enough. It's not worth risking your life just to save some weight. Just carry plenty of water. Signs of dehydration, at least for me, and there were times I got dehydrated. It happens to everybody. But for for me, the signs of dehydration that I noticed, the earliest signs that I noticed was I'd start to get a headache, really bad headache up front. My lips would become very chapped and dry, cracked, and my urine would be really dark, almost brown. So thankfully I never got to that point too often, but keep an eye on those three. If you start getting a headache, your lips start getting really chapped and dry, and obviously if you're thirsty, drink, duh. But keep an eye on those factors. All right, the water report. The water report is by far the most valuable thing you'll have down in the desert, by far. More valuable than maps, more valuable than guidebook pages. It's the most valuable piece of data, piece of paper data that you will have. Because throughout the desert, you're pretty much hopping from water source to water source to water source. That's all you're doing. You're just jumping, okay, here's the water source. When's the next one? How many miles to the next one? All right, I'm carrying 4 liters of water because the next one is 20 miles away. This is what I'm doing. So download that, print it out. They usually hand out updated copies at kickoff. I believe the next one that I got was in... No, it couldn't have been Idlewild. It might have been Idlewild. I don't know. But anyway, make sure you at least start with the water report. You can figure it out from there. All right, this brings us to heat and the sun. You have to be careful when you hike. In the beginning, in spring, it's not as bad. You can hike through the middle of the day, especially if you're from an area that is regularly sunny. I'm from California. I'm from an area that gets 115 degree summers. 110 is fairly common at the kind of peak of summer. So, and I work outside. I work with kids on a school campus, so I work outside. I'm used to it, so it doesn't bother me all that much. But if you're not used to it, you'd be really careful. A lot of people choose to hike at night to avoid the sun. As I mentioned before, that will allow you to use less water because you're obviously not going to be in such a hot situation. You're not going to be sweating as much. So hiking at night is a viable option. I didn't like it because it meant I didn't get to see what I was hiking through a lot of the time, unless there was a nice full moon. And then you could hike without a headlamp sometimes in the desert with a full moon. Beautiful. But if you're looking to do siesta-style hiking, that's another style. You would generally hike, you get up early, either before the sun comes up or just as it's coming up. Get up early, pack up, hike until about 11 a.m., and then find a shady spot or set up your tent. Find a shady spot, set up your tent, and then take a siesta until about 4 or 5. That's when the sun starts going low. That's when it calms down. It's not nearly as hot. It's still up in the sky, but it's not nearly as hot. Temperature starts dropping, and then you hike into the night. And we had an expression, 10 before 10. And that was, ideally in the desert, you want to get 10 miles before 10 a.m. because that's when the heat really starts kicking in. And if you can get 10 miles before 10, then you could do the siesta, or you could just, hike a little ways into that. You were under a lot less pressure. So 10 before 10 is a good strategy. And the siesta thing works. I only did the siesta thing a couple of times, and that was during some really rough stretches. But yeah, you can make it through hiking straight through the day. Chrome dome umbrellas are great for that. I'll get to that when I get to clothing, but yeah, chrome dome umbrellas are great for that. Nice hats, good for it. So times of the day, just be careful that middle chunk of the day when it's really hot. All right, so we'll get into clothing now. I started off with long sleeve shirt, long pants, hat, kind of boonie style military surplus hat, and I ended up, even though I'm very pale, as I'm sure most of you can tell, I ended up rolling up my sleeves, unzipping the pant legs. I had the zip-off pants. Unzipping the pant legs, throwing those in the backpack, and I switched my hat from a boonie-style hat to just a baseball cap that I'd wear a bandana underneath. That worked out better for me. And other than my nose and my ears, I really didn't use sunscreen a lot. And my nose and my ears were the only spots that got roasted, got seriously sunburned. Built up a tan pretty quickly. It was okay. But I would recommend light-colored clothing, breathable, loose. Umbrella. One of those reflective umbrellas that used to be made by Go Light. Now I think it's Euroschwim. I don't know, swing light, swing flex, whatever it is. You can look it up online. It's there. Umbrellas, the reflective umbrellas are worth their weight in gold in the desert. When you're going through a really hot, dry stretch, having that umbrella 10 degrees cooler instantly. Not having that sun directly beating down on your skin, it's worth it. So I would highly recommend getting one of those reflective umbrellas. They're fantastic, and for little freak rainstorms, they're good too. I ended up ditching mine and then picking it back up when I got up to the Pacific Northwest. It worked okay, but for the sun, I'm going to carry it all the way through the desert. It's great. And it's pretty light too. I think it's something like 8 ounces or less. And for an umbrella, for a piece that doubles as sun and rain protection, that's not bad. Sunscreen, I kind of said something about this, but your nose and your ears, you should always keep some sunscreen. Even if you don't like putting sunscreen anywhere else, your nose and your ears will get fried, regardless of wearing a hat or bandana over your ears or a wide-brimmed hat, any of that. Nose, ears, keep them covered in sunscreen. This is coming from a very pale European guy. Cover them up. Okay, weather. The desert is very hot during the day, as you'd expect, and it can get very cold at night. I didn't experience too many freezing cold nights until we got up into the high desert, but cold nights can happen. It gets really, really, really windy in the desert. Really windy. Like, blow your tent off the ground while you're in it kind of windy. We were at the Sunrise Trailhead, and it was so windy, we figured out it was 80-mile-an-hour gusts. It was so windy that 4 of us, instead of trying to set up our tents, decided to sleep in the bathroom at the trailhead. And anyone who's ever been to a trailhead pit toilet knows that it's got to be really bad outside if you want to spend any extended amount of time in there. So it gets really windy. It can be very cold. It can easily drop below freezing because there's no tree cover. There's nothing to kind of keep heat in. You're really exposed. It's open plains a lot of the time, or you're kind of on top of low rolling hills. So the wind and the cold just blows right across. There's nothing stopping it. It rarely rains, obviously. That's why it's a desert. It can, though. It can rain, it can sleet, it can hail, it can snow. Any of that's possible. But I went through the entire desert without a single spot of rain while I was hiking. I did get hit with a little rain, thankfully, while I was in a town, and the day that I left town, stopped raining, didn't rain again. So just be aware that you do need rain protection, you do need some form of shelter. You can't go the whole desert without it. You will suffer if you do. I saw people do it, but it's bad. Make sure you have something, anything to block the rain. All right, wildlife. Now, this is one that a lot of people are concerned about, and I've gotten a fair number of questions. So let's start off with the obvious one, rattlesnakes. There are a ton of rattlesnakes in the desert. Tons. You will see at least one every day after a certain point. They're everywhere. But they don't want to have anything to do with you. They don't want to be near you, more so than you don't want to be near them. They will give you a loud warning long before you get close to them. Make sure that if you like to hike with an iPod in or a music player and you have headphones in, make sure you have one out. Never have both in, because there will be rattlesnakes very close to the trail, sometimes even on the trail. And if you have both headphones in, you might not hear the rattle, so make sure you have one out. It's really important, because they're not the brightest thing on the planet, and every once in a while you sneak up on one. Not intentionally, but it happens. And they freak out when you're right on top of them, and you need to be able to move quick. Not that they want to attack you, but if they're scared enough, it can happen. So lots of rattlesnakes. Make sure you're paying attention to your surroundings. Make sure you're paying attention to the noises they make. The rattle, make sure you listen for that. They don't want to mess with you at night either. Once it gets dark and starts getting cold, they stop moving. They kind of freeze up. They turn into little snake popsicles. They only are active when it's hot. Obviously, they're reptiles. So when it's cold outside, when it's at nighttime, you don't really have to think about them. They're not actively aggressive, except Mojave Greens. Those things are mean. But other than that, most rattlesnakes you're going to come across are just going to rattle at you, they're going to hiss, and they're going to try and back up and get away from you. Just be careful. Their habitat is rocky outcropping, so pay attention when you're going through areas that have a lot of overhanging rocks and little caves on the ground and that kind of stuff. They generally don't hang out in grasslands or anything that would really hide them, you don't have to worry too much about it, but every once in a while you'll come across one on a bush or just laid out across the trail. Just be aware that most of the time they're going to be in rocky outcroppings. So let's say if you're setting up camp, don't do it next to a rocky outcropping. If you're going to cowboy camp, don't do it next to a rocky outcropping. Just saying. Scorpions, I only saw 2 the entire time, and it was actually after the desert. I saw them just north of Kennedy Meadows. I heard of one guy getting tagged in the toe by one. He went to the hospital and he was back on trail, I think, the next day or the day after. Just be careful. You know, wear footwear, good footwear. Pay attention to where you're sitting. Be aware of your surroundings. Other than that, insects really are not a big problem in the desert, thankfully. Very few mosquitoes, because mosquitoes breed in water, and there isn't a lot of water in the desert, so you don't really have to worry about mosquitoes. This is why a lot of people cowboy camp in the desert, because there's just no flying insects. There's, gnats and annoying things. But other than that, nothing's really going to bite you. I did come across some camel spiders. I was camped on a Jeep road on a poodle dog bush detour with 2 other guys, and we were all cowboy camping, as we'd done countless nights on the trail. I turned over, I was sitting in my sleeping bag, eating dinner, chatting with the guys, and I turn over, and there's 2 camel spiders sitting on my sleeping pad next to me. They're completely harmless, other than giving you kind of a painful bite. Physically painful, not of toxic origin, anything like that. They're not poisonous. They're completely harmless to humans other than that. I just kind of brushed them off the sleeping pad and they went skittering off into the bush. But if you're aware of camel spiders, you'll know how creepy they are. Okay, cougars. A lot of people are concerned about mountain lions. I didn't see a single one the whole trip. I did, more than once, wake up to mountain lion tracks all around my sleeping bag. I was a little scary, but it made me realize that they don't really want to have anything to do with you. And as long as you don't act like prey, you're not going to be prey. I definitely went to bed with no mountain lion tracks around the sleeping pad, and then I'd wake up after cowboy camping, they'd be all around. That happened a couple of times on trail. Just don't act like prey. Really simply, if you see a mountain lion, make yourself big. If you've got trekking poles, wave them around, make lots of loud noise. If you can pick something up without bending down too small, pick up a rock and throw it at it. But other than that, mountain lions they're like, think about a house cat. It's very curious. It wants to come over and explore and investigate something new in its environment. Generally speaking, once it kind of figures out that you're not food, it goes away. It doesn't want to have anything to do with you. I have never heard of a hiker being eaten by one. I know hikers have gone missing over the years, but I never saw a mountain lion the entire time. So I'm not particularly concerned about it. And I don't think it should be. Just be aware of what to do on the off chance that you do come across a mountain lion. Foot care, okay. Or I guess maybe we'll go to camping and then we'll go to the medical stuff. So camping, cowboy camping. You will cowboy camp. You will. Everyone does. Everyone. There's not a single person that I've met on trail who did not at some point start cowboy camping. The 2 reasons to sleep in a tent for on any trip. One is because of flying insects, and one is because of rain or bad weather. Neither of those really happen in the desert all that often. You don't generally have mosquitoes or any other kind of flying insects, and it very rarely rains. And like I said about the rattlesnakes and scorpions, all this, people are concerned about them crawling into their sleeping bag. No, you're usually hiking until it's already dark and already starting to get cold. They're not active at that point. They've already found a place to sleep. They're not going to come hunt you out. And again, this gets into not picking your campsites carefully. Don't sleep next to a rocky outcropping where there might be rattlesnakes. Sleep in kind of an open area. Make sure you walk around your campsite first before you lay out your sleeping bag. But you will cowboy camp because it's so much easier to wake up and toss your stuff in your backpack and go than having to have this extra chore before you go to sleep and after you wake up. Generally, you just want to lay out your stuff, eat, crash because you're so tired. And in the morning, you don't want to have this extra chore putting stuff away. It's a pain. That's all it is. That's all it amounts to. It's an extra chore and you don't really need to. You will cowboy camp. Just accept that. And sleeping pad type when you're cowboy camping, again, because you will cowboy camp. Everything in the desert is spiky. There are thorns and spines. Everything wants to kill you in the desert. All the plants are spiky. There's cactus spines everywhere. There are these little flower-like things that are all over the trail. They're everywhere. That are covered in these hair-like spines. And they will pop your sleeping bag, or sleeping pad, sorry. They will pop it. No matter how hard you try to keep it from getting popped, if you're not sleeping in a tent every single night, and your sleeping bag is just on your ground cloth, or your sleeping pad's just on your ground cloth, you will get pokey stuff in it. It will pop. Mine popped by 200 and something, Coon Creek Cabin. And I was really careful with it. Woke up middle of the night, and blew it up, seemed like it was going to be fine. Woke up in the middle of the night, I was laying on the floor. So just be aware that in the desert, at least, you could probably make an inflatable sleeping pad work further north, but in the desert, just carry a foam pad. It's idiot proof. It's not going to pop, and you can throw it out in the middle of the day for the 1,000 times you're going to need to change your socks, because that's something you're really going to have to do. And that leads us into foot care. So you're going to need to change your socks and wash your feet as often as possible. You're going to probably change. There was a time in the desert when I was really trying to avoid more blisters, and I was changing my socks every hour on the hour. And it worked. I didn't get any blisters when I was doing that. I had some really bad ones that I was trying to heal before I got any new ones, before I collected any more. Make sure you change your socks, and at the very least wipe down your feet, with your hands, or if you have a bandana, you can get a little bit wet and kind of scrub some off on the high friction areas, your heels, the side of your heels, the ball of your foot, that kind of stuff. If you have pointy shoes that sort of squeeze your toes, get between your toes, clean your feet, so that the things that cause blisters are heat, friction, and moisture. You take out one of those, you're not going to get a blister. So change your socks. Let them dry on your pack. I had safety pins, and I pin my socks to my pack and wear the other pair, and just keep changing them out. Like that. Change them out. Every hour, every couple hours, whatever you need to do, however hot it is. Make sure you empty your shoes out frequently. You'll get a ton of the stuff. If you're wearing trail runners, you'll end up with a ton of sand and dust and grit and everything inside your shoe. Clean it out. That will help you keep blisters. Other than that, I didn't use any moleskin or anything. I just got blisters. I got a few of them. Not all the time, but when it was really bad, I got blisters, and I dealt with it. And make sure that you're wearing light, breathable shoes. The heavy hiking boots, some people had them, worked for some people. Everyone's feet are different, but the light, breathable shoes will let your feet dry a little bit faster. They let in a lot of dust and stuff, but they will let your feet dry, which you need to have happen if you don't want blisters. And getting into blister care when you do get blisters, because 99.9% of you will get blisters. No matter how hard you try not to, it will happen. So for me, everybody has a different strategy, but for me, my blister care, and I talked about this in my first aid kit video, but my blister care ended up being me taking one of my safety pins, sanitizing the end of it with a lighter, stabbing it all the way through a blister, so in one side, out the other, and then twisting it so that the skin, the hole widened enough to where it couldn't seal back up with just solidified goo. Twist it, drain it, obviously a little piece of toilet paper, clean it, and then put a pair of socks. I didn't take the skin off. You need that buildup of callus to protect your feet. And then I just put socks on, my freshest pair of socks that I had. I put those on, went to sleep. I did this right before I get in my sleep bag, after I'd done everything else. You never want to pop blisters when you still have walking to do. You will torture yourself, and you could risk infections. So just cleaned them out, let them dry overnight in socks, and when I wake up the next day, the skin underneath would be a little bit sore because it's raw pink skin, but the dead skin on the outside would be hardened into a callus, and at the end of that next day, the skin had healed up pretty much, and it was just one big solid callus, and then I generally didn't get blisters in that area. again. They would pop up elsewhere, but generally not in that area. That protected it. Okay, so yeah, foot care. It's really really important. Just take care of your feet. Take care of your feet. Okay, chafe. Now this is one that again I talked about in my first aid kit video a little bit, but it's really important that everyone knows about this. You can get chafe in a bunch of different areas. You can get it on your back. You can get it any part of your body that's rubbing against itself or against something else. You can get chafe. It can be on your shoulders. It can be on your back. It can be on your inner thighs. Anything that's rubbing at all. Rubbing on your clothes, rubbing on your pack, rubbing on itself, anything. I got chafe on my lower back so bad that it almost looked like I was going to have a scar. And this was by Big Bear. My backpack was sitting a little bit too high and it was just kind of grinding on it. It was bad. So once I figured that out, I lowered my pack a little bit and it pretty much solved the problem. But so I had it there. I had it on my inner thighs. And so bad that it actually wore all the hair off my legs. And I'm kind of a hairy guy. It doesn't really look like it, but I have a lot of body hair. So it wore all the hair off my legs or off my inner thighs, which was kind of a funny sight to see, and became very very tender. And I solved that and I kind of always alternated between going commando and just in my hiking shorts and wearing sport boxer briefs. I realized if I wore the sport boxer briefs, it kept my legs from having that problem. So I started doing that. I started not going commando anymore. I know a lot of people do go commando. I don't. But the worst place by far was ass chafe. That was crippling. That was truly crippling. I mean, think about it. Every step you take, every step is just 2 layers of raw skin rubbing against each other. I know a lot of people who got ass chafe, and there's a few different methods for fixing it, for remedying it. I use hydrocortisone cream, not the ointment, but the cream. I use hydrocortisone cream, and that worked really well. So at the end of the day, I would make sure everything was clean, take a wet wipe and wipe all the important parts, especially that, down, and then I would rub some cream in there, and generally the next day it would pretty much healed. And if I kept doing that for a couple days, then it was definitely all gone. I just had to be really careful. And after the desert, I didn't really have too many problems with that. Some people say Vagisil works really well. I didn't have any experience with that. I didn't do that, but I heard that it works really well. So you can try that. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything. Yeah, I got water, heat, okay, yeah. If you have any questions at all about hiking in the desert that I didn't cover, please put them down in the comments below. I'm happy to answer. I'm leaving for my trip in almost exactly 1 week. So I'm going to try and get a bunch of these videos out. I've got a whole list of things that I was planning on doing, and I've got a little sidetracked. So I'm going to try and get a bunch of videos out really quickly in this next week. Hopefully I'll be able to do that. But just let me know if there's anything I forgot or any specific questions you want me to answer. Like, comment, subscribe. Put any questions in the comments below, and I will talk to you guys later. All right. Bye-bye.